So what is a good retirement monthly income? Well, that's what we're gonna talk about in this video right now. Okay, so what is a real good monthly retirement income for you? I know this result can vary drastically depending on your situation. You could be single, married, with children, without children, with parents, aging parents, or whatever it might be. The question is, what's a good retirement income for you? What's good for amount per month that you should be having? Well, let's just dig into that right now and how you can actually achieve that to make it even more possible in your life. All right, so what is that number for you, right? What's a good number? Now, that's the thing. I know I get a lot of comments from you guys, especially if I say a higher number. There's always somebody that comes in saying, I could live on $3,000 a month just fine. Congratulations, that's great. That's not the point of this video. The point of this video is what's a good number for you? Is 3,000 considered a good number for you? Most people in the United States, this is not a great number, right? 3,000 a month does hardly anything at all right now. Now, if you are single, it's better. If you're married, not so much. If you're married to a wife that really, has good taste, like my wife is, that number's gotta be a little bit higher, right? It just depends, right? Where do you shop? Where do you not shop? Where do you live? If you live in California, that number's gonna be way different than Mississippi, right? So there's so many different variables. The question is, what is that number for you? And this is a tough question because I remember when I used to be a financial advisor back in the day, right? Over 20 years ago, I would ask someone, and these would be people in their mid to late 20s typically, they're young married couples with, maybe with one child at that point or a child on the way. And as we're sitting down talking about it, I would ask them, well, how much monthly income do you want in retirement? And you know what's funny? The answer would surprise me. Instead of giving me a number, they would usually just say, well, as much as I can get. I'm like, well, obviously as much as you can get. But what's that number? Well, I don't know. I don't know how much I'll need in the future, which was absolutely true, right? You don't even know what you're gonna need in the future. And so I always like to err on the side of having a good, solid number in the future. And here's why, because in that same period of time, I was trying to plan my own retirement. I was a financial advisor, and I was hoping and praying that if I was cheap enough and I saved everything I possibly could stuff into my mutual funds and retirement plans and everything else, that hopefully by the time I was in my 40s, I would have at least $2 million. Why? Because at that time, this was over 20 years ago, in the early 2000s, I thought a great retirement income would be $5,000 a month or $60,000 a year. And so that was my goal. I said, man, if I can just save up, of course, $2 million, live on the 3% a year, then I can actually be able to make that money last forever, hopefully. Now, 3% was a little bit aggressive. I probably should have done 2%, but still, that $2 million, to have to save that up in about 20 years is no small feat. Now this would be no small feat because if I actually even made 9% in the stock market. Now I used to believe I was gonna make 12% in the stock market. Life and experience has taught me that that was a completely false, untrue number. And even 10% is really overestimating. You're lucky if you're investing in the S&P 500 to make a 9% long-term average. That's 9%, guys, not 10 or 12. Well, 9%, if I wanna live on that, get to that point of $2 million, right? Now remember, I have inflation to worry about and everything else too. So even with inflation and everything else, I'd have to save almost $100,000 a year for the next 20 years to then live on $60,000 a year. Does that seem kind of ridiculous to you? Yeah, it was to me too. And so I realized that's a pretty hard feat. Now I thought if I just save fast, as fast as I can, this would work. But no, because of inflation, that means I have to have really like $5 million in those 20 years so that I can then finally live on, that $60,000 a year, right? So there's those kind of issues that you'll run into when you start to put in real numbers. This is what got me away from being a financial advisor because I realized, wow, if I actually put in conservative numbers, meaning I'm gonna be a little bit liberal on my inflation rate, just in case inflation is higher than what the government says, because we all know the government doesn't tell you the right numbers so that they can make money last longer in Social Security and things like that. So they give us low numbers on purpose to show that inflation is not as high as it actually is. And of course, financial advisors love to tell you higher returns in the stock market than you actually get. And so when I started putting in real numbers, even as a financial advisor, I got depressed. And when I tried to put in my clients' numbers, I got more depressed because no one would become financially free. And even worse, even my own father, who had strictly saved in his 401k with the match, paid off all of his debt, still could not retire until he worked into his 70s for the same exact reason. And so what is a good monthly income for you? It just depends. That retirement monthly income you need, you got to base it on today as much as you can. And so my personal belief is, how can you get there faster? Because we know that inflation is always fighting against you. Can you get to that point faster than usual? Well, see, because of this, I started looking for other answers. I started looking around to see what was out there. And I started to see that really the best results I ever saw from anybody doing any kind of investing was not from stocks or trading options. And trust me, I was in that world too. I was teaching people how to do that stuff. And it wasn't from mutual funds, but it was actually in real estate investing, because it was not accumulation of money like every financial advisor teaches you. It's acceleration of money. That acceleration of money is what it really works better than the accumulation thing that they try to teach you. Because for example, when I had one client in particular, he had $1 million saved up in his retirement account. Now, his financial advisor told him, you can live on that 3%. Right? That same old 3% you always hear about, right? He said, you can live on 3% in the future. And he said, no, that's not good, but that's $30,000 a year. And I live in California. That's not a good lifestyle at all in California. So he started looking for other answers. He found our Money Ripples podcast. And then from there, he said, you know what, I'm going to try this out. And so as we worked with him one-on-one, we said, well, hey, there's ways you can diversify into not just rental real estate. Yeah, he could buy a couple duplexes, which he did. He can get into apartments and get into partnerships with that. Oil and gas investments and everything else. The next thing you know, his million was now kicking off over $100,000 a year. It wasn't about how much you accumulate, it's about what kind of income does it generate for you. That is the difference. And so as a result, if you want, say, in today's dollars, you want that, say like I wanted $60,000 a year, the question is how quickly can I get to that point? Well, if in today's dollars, right, not factoring inflation, if I want to have $60,000 a year right now, I would need at least $600,000 if I'm just going to earn 10%, right? So $600,000 earning 10% is $60,000 a year. So the question is, how fast can you get there? Now, if you're going to wait another 10, 12, 15 years to get to that point, you're going to need double. You're going to need probably about 1.2 million to have that same amount. Now, most people we talk to, they say they want at least 10,000 a month. That's usually the goal, 120,000 a year. Well, guys, if you want to do that right now, you have to have 1.2 million. Now, if you have 1.2 million in mutual funds, 3% of that's only $36,000 a year, and then depending on where you have that money saved, you don't have to pay taxes on it. But if you instead can take that 1.2 million, making 10% a year in an actual real estate investment, and yes, there are some that are out there that contractually will say, we will pay you X amount of dollars. Isn't guaranteed. Not at all. No, anything can happen, right? Just because someone gives you a contract to say, this is what I'm going to pay you, just like you do a contract with the bank when you do a mortgage, and you say, here's the interest I'm going to pay you on my mortgage. But if you default, guess what? They take the house. You could also do the same thing. You could be a lender of your money. For example, you could lend your money out to other investors that say, I will pay you 10, 11, 12% a year on that money. And then from there, you get that income. Now, of course, there's always risk. That's why I always say you can lose money, things can go wrong. But if you make sure you have claim on that property, even if they stop paying you, you could actually foreclose on them and take the property to be able to get your money back. So there's a way that you can have protection of your money and still earn returns on it as well. And that's the difference. So if you want 10,000 a month, get to that 1 million or 1.2 million as quickly as you possibly can. If you're gonna need more time to do that, you might need to get to a couple million. And the great thing is, if you take that money you're earning and reinvest it, it can actually help you get there faster. So again, I'm not promising any overnight retirement stories or anything like that, but you actually could. I'll give you another example. I had a woman who, for her good retirement monthly income was just $2,000 a month at the time. This is 5 years ago. Now, she wanted $2,000 a month. She was going to do health coaching. Of course, she wanted to just do a few of those, and then $2,000 a month would just take off all the pressure for her bills that she had. She was a single woman in her 50s. And I said, well, how much do you have to invest with? She says, I have $250,000 in the stock market. However, my financial advisor told me I'm going to have to save a lot more to be able to live on that $24,000 a year. And I said, yeah, you do. You have to get it up to, at least in today's dollars, it's about $800,000 a year, or $800,000 total, which is over triple what it is right now. And if you have inflation, you're probably gonna have to get it way over $1 million. You're gonna have to at least quadruple, quintuple, maybe sextuple this money just to get to that goal in the next 10 years. Or guess what? What if you took that $250,000 and earned 10% a year? What do you make? $25,000 a year, right? Which is just over $2,000 a month, isn't it? She's like, wait a minute, are you saying instead of having to hopefully retire in 10 plus years, are you saying I could actually do it in the next year or so? I said, it's very possible. You sure could. Depending on what you invest in, yes, you could. And she said, oh my goodness, that's blowing my mind. And that's the thing, guys, like for her, she didn't even think it was a possibility because she had been so ingrained by financial advisors and all the expert opinions out there that you just gotta save and save and save forever. And at some point, hopefully you got enough to pull out the little measly bucks. You don't really get a good retirement monthly income, do you? That is the difference. You want to make sure you have a good, strong monthly income. And I'll tell you, we got clients that sometimes want $20,000, $30,000 a month. I had one guy that came to me, he wanted $500,000 a year of monthly income, not because he needed it, because he wanted as much of that lifestyle income he could get. Now, he had $3 million saved up. He was actually in his mid-50s by this point. And his financial advisor says, if you just save another 13 years, packing away, this guy was packing away, by the way, a couple $100,000 a year he was saving up. And even then, the financial advisor said, if you do that, you might make it by the time you're age 65, in about 13 years from now. And I told him, I said, listen, you got $3 million, you make 10%, that's $300,000 a year already. But if you take that $300,000, reinvest it the next year, that just tacks on some more and some more, you can actually probably do it within 4 or 5 years on the rate that you're going with the $200,000 you're already saving. And he's like, that's better. I like that. So that's the difference, guys. Don't focus on accumulating your money and compounding your interest. Instead, compound your income by doing real cash flowing, income focused investments instead of growth investments that may or may not make that money, especially when there's a downturn in the market, which could also set you back another 10, 15, 20 years, and then you're still chasing inflation. So be aware of that. So if you want a good, strong monthly income, focus on income-based assets that have real assets backing it up versus just paper assets that might go up or down depending on what Elon Musk or Donald Trump twitters, or tweets on Twitter and things like that. So if you want to figure out how you can actually start building passive income right now, I recommend go to our passive income calculator at moneyripples.com. You'll have that in the description below. But if you go into that passive income calculator, you can find out just how much you could create today and then use that to give you a launch pad for tomorrow. So check that out now.